Hello, and welcome back to Bitwig featuring the grid. Today, let's build a repeater. Our concept was feedback, so taking an effects grid and maybe a little drum loop, why don't we make something that delays audio, captures it, and feeds it back? Now, from our previous conversation, we know that long delay is going to be required if we want to make a feedback connection. So why don't we go ahead and just start by building a rudimentary delay ourselves. So get used to the drum beat. It's going to be there for a while. So with long delay here, we don't really hear a difference from the sound a minute ago. All we've done is make it a little bit late. So in the mix category, we do have blend, which is an excellent way to create a wet-dry control. So let's take... Now we can hear both. So now just a little bit of the later delay. Not bad. So we typically would have that as a mix control or something like that. But then we often have the option of feedback built into a delay. So let's make it ourselves. Number one, you don't want the feedback to be enormous. So let's put a volume control here. And then number two, it needs to come back to the input, but along with the original source. So if we look in our window footer down here, somewhere we've got an option under control on my platform to add these two signals together. Now that is going to stay big and get bigger unless I set it to a lower volume. There we go. So we've already got a basic delay going on with our blend and with our feedback level. Now for a repeater, it's kind of a particular dance that's going on. We don't really need the blend. We can get rid of that right now. But what we do need is to switch the input between the original signal and then flip it over to only the feedback signal when we want to repeat the sound that just went through. And similarly, we need to switch the output from the original signal to only the delay when the feedback is engaged. So first, let's start with our nice big repeat switch, because we're going to need something for controlling this idea. So that's our repeat on off. And now, if we go back to the mix category, we could actually start with the select module for the time being, which would be a pretty good place to go from. So version 2 is the delay, version 1 is the dry signal going straight through. I'm going to go ahead and duplicate the select, because like I suggested, we don't really need the add anymore. So now version 1 is the regular input signal, and version 2 will be the feedback signal. And again, the gain switch is not really necessary, because when we're in this feedback mode, we're only passing the feedback through and we want it to repeat infinitely. So let's see if we blew anything up. Hit play. Plain signal. That's fine. And then if we change the length of the delay, we should be getting... There we go. Not bad. So let's start from there. And then let's go ahead. Maybe we don't want... A select is awfully useful if we just have two inputs and we are discretely switching between them. But in this case, we might want a little bit of crossfade. So instead of select, the merge module might be a good choice for us, because it allows a non-binary value, so that we can actually have a transitional time. So in this case, why don't we go ahead and go over to the level category and add a lag. So when the button flips, it's going to very quickly switch from on to off. But then the lag is going to give us a little bit of a ramp on the upside and the downside. So now we can have basically a small crossfade time. So our sharp edges are already gone. And you could tune that setting for quite some time. Now, where we're going eventually, one thing that's nice about Bitwig is that we can process audio and notes along the same signal path, and that's true within an effect. So why don't we switch this over? Instead of a button, I'm going to use gate in, which is just saying, okay, any keyboard gate signal that is received, if I play a note, then I'll get an on signal, and if no notes are being held, I'll get an off signal, and that can be my switch. Now, it's not going to magically work out of the box, because what we need to do is take this standard audio track and actually convert it to be a hybrid track. So once we do this, then it has an understanding of both note inputs, and we'll switch our input to be note input, and yes, please monitor and record enable. Just you. So now we should be getting both the note signals and the audio signals. Which is a much easier way to trigger things. Now, if we were going to add one more thing here, maybe we want different note values that come through to set different timing intervals. So let's start with just 1/16th note of delay. And then if we go into the I/O category towards the end, there is a key on module that lets us identify just a single note and pull its gate signals out. So we're happy with the global setting saying we're either in repeat mode or we're not. And now we'll have some local options to set, and I'm going to play a note on my keyboard. There we go. That apparently was C2. I didn't have to know it. I could just click learn in the inspector. And now when this is played, well, that should probably be our nice, fast, simple speed. So let's go ahead and make a couple more copies. Maybe I'll do C2, C#2, and D2. So I've got my 3 keys all in a row. Now, if I want to change that delay time, I'm basically going to go to the I/O category, pull the modulator out option. And now I just need to figure out how much I need to set this to. So, okay, there's where I'm hitting D2. Now what I want is for this timing, I'm going to hold down the key and I can actually watch. Looks like +2. Yeah, that looks right. So when I'm pressing the key, you can see my time is jumping up to +2. And when I let go, we're going back to 0. Let's verify that for a minute. Normal. Yeah. And then I just need to make the number 2 value work in the middle, because I've already got 1 working. 0 is 0. No modulation is going to keep us exactly right there. So let's look at something interesting. We've got this N-Latch module that came along at a certain point. It will accept up to 8 inputs and outputs, and it is creating pairs because it's keeping track and saying only one of these outputs is going to be active at a time, so we will automatically shut all the others off when this occurs. Cool. So if I don't want to go all the way to 2, if I just want to go halfway to 2, then maybe when I trigger my middle C# here, I really just want to scale the signal down 50%. And then the only question that's left is, how do I get all of these values into the modulator out? Well, if I bring in the sum module, this lets me add an arbitrary number of inputs and then add them together, which in this case gets them all on one wire. Now, why didn't I connect the first input? Well, that's my 0 value. I don't actually want it to trigger anything, and I don't want to multiply it to create 0. I will just create 0 by not connecting it. So let's see if I'm getting 3 different values now. That's working pretty well. That's kind of fun. So it's so fun, let's build the same thing all over again. So I'm going to go ahead and actually turn off everything we just did and bypass it. So now we're back to normal. Remember, we converted this to a hybrid track. That was important because it is nice to go outside of the grid. The grid is a fine place to make things, but if you can use the regular devices and the modulation signals, then you get to work with more familiar audio blocks and create something that way and see a lot more of the program. So, a basic delay unit. Now remember, what were the principles? We had an on-off switch that was telling us when to go into repeat mode, and repeat mode basically said, switch from the dry signal over to the wet signal, engage feedback all the way, and switch the input source to the delay so that it's only listening to the feedback and no longer taking the new input. So you're just getting a frozen repeat. So let's do that. We can start with the delay, which is fine. We'll bring the feedback down to 0. Since this is an effect, we probably want it with the mix all the way up, because that last step of bypassing the input is a little tricky. We can't do it with the delay module itself. So let's go ahead and add a tool. I keep saying module. Device. Let's add a tool device, which actually gives us a volume control. So now we can switch on and off what's going into the delay. Now, before we go much further, I'm going to go ahead, thinking into the future, and add a chain module. The chain module is just going to allow us to have everything in one device, which is nice for saving a preset just at this level. But importantly, it's also going to let us create modulation sources from the top down into any of these devices. That's really why we're doing this. So if we add a button, I think we called it repeat before. Let's call it repeat again. Now, what happens when we flip this button? Well, we go from no delay, meaning it's going to be totally dry, so just the dry input signal, to completely hearing only the wet signal and cranking up the feedback all the way. And part 3, turning the volume going into the delay all the way down so that only the feedback signal is happening and new signal coming off the drums is not following us. So let's try it out. That seems to be working already. Now, what was the next step that we did? We used the keyboard to trigger this instead of a button. So if I'm going to use any note played on the keyboard to trigger some change that's just on-off, well, that sounds like an envelope with a very simple shape. Something that probably looks like an organ. Very fast attack, complete sustain, so that there's really no decay time. It doesn't matter anymore. And that the release time is quick as well. Now, if I select the chain module, one thing that's nice is that where we see all of our modulation routings, we can just kind of freely drag them around if we need to. So I would like everything I just assigned on the button to switch over and now be assigned to the envelope itself. Let's hit play, play some notes. Remember, because we're a hybrid track, we're receiving notes. That seems about right. Now, the one other feature that we had was that on select notes, we could kind of set different delay times. Why don't we go ahead and try to do that as well? If we're thinking about different pitches on the keyboard, then the Keytrack modulator is a useful way to do it. What we're going to want in the end is, let's do it exactly the same. It's a similar interface. Let's say I want a range of 2 in this case, or maybe, let's just set it to a very large range. And then I can edit the Keytrack interface to say, well, I was working around C2 before, so maybe I'd like to continue working around C2. And I would like to narrow the range to see that interesting. See what's happening? Just with those little dots there, I can already go to other rhythms that I would have had to build in the grid myself. So let's try it. Pretty quick transitions on delay times can lead to that kind of audio transition. But let's keep it. Why not? It is functioning and working. So how about a twist? Let's take a different idea altogether. Let's think about something very different for a moment. The instrument selector device, all of the selectors. We've got instrument selector, note effects selector, FX selector, as in the audio effect selector. This allows for multiple layers to be set up, and then only one layer is triggered at a time. So if I've got this one record enabled, it's an instrument by itself. Only those notes are triggered until I switch layers. Maybe I'll hold notes, switch layers. And you can see it's allowing an overlap between the layers, and that's kind of fun. And we've been working with modulators. We could modulate this as much as we want, but life is easier when you don't have to. So now all of our selector devices have voice modes here in the inspector, which can be quite interesting. So let's just think round robin. Many of these are based on note triggers. So every new note that comes in will just automatically trigger up the next layer available. Which is a nice way to create variety. Now the FX Selector exists also, so if I enable this one over here, it's currently in a random mode, saying every new note that comes in is going to randomly pick one of these effects layers, which has a variety of presets and other things laid in. Now, if this sounds a little bit out there, it might be because this effect selector was configured to live over here in our new delay unit. So what if this went into our feedback chain? So now, for every new note that's triggered, if this effect selector is enabled, within the feedback that's being created, some pretty crazy extreme effect will be selected. Why not? Everything is so peaceful and normal until I start playing notes, right? I'll keep using that same note just so the rhythm doesn't change. So I'm not sure that that's exactly the kind of repeater that we had in mind. But again, coming outside of the grid, using devices that are more familiar, I mean, one nice thing with the selectors, now it's just time to pick some other weird effect and throw it in. Maybe I want a flanger sometimes. Maybe I want to pick a preset that's has the word lasers in it. And now at some point, there we go. And it'll just keep working even if we threw plugins or whatever else. It knows the length, it'll just randomly pick between them. It's a bit in the spirit of Repeater. So there we have it. Thank you for joining us. We'll see you again soon.